Tomorrow morning, you wake up, check your phone, and see the alert. Nuclear weapons have been launched. In less than 30 minutes, the world as you know it will end. This isn't a movie or a video game. This is the scenario that keeps military strategists awake at night. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Despite having thousands of nuclear weapons pointed at each other for decades, we're shockingly unprepared for what happens when someone actually presses the button. We've built bunkers for politicians and emergency broadcast systems that most people don't know how to use. We've made plans that assume the internet will still work and supply chains will hold together. But would any of it actually save you? The Cold War ended, but the weapons didn't go anywhere. They just got better, faster, and in some cases, easier to launch by mistake. Today, 9 countries control roughly 12,500 nuclear warheads. That's enough to end civilization several times over. And the systems designed to keep us safe? Some of them are held together with duct tape and prayers, running on computers older than your parents. So let's ask the question nobody wants to think about. If nuclear war happened tomorrow, what would actually happen to you? Not to governments or militaries, but to normal people trying to survive the worst day in human history. Are our cities ready? Are our hospitals ready? Are you ready? The answer might surprise you, and it definitely won't comfort you. Let's find out what humanity has actually prepared for doomsday, and where the gaps in our survival plans are big enough to swallow entire countries. Spoiler alert, there are a lot of gaps. So the missiles are launched. Somewhere in a fortified bunker, radar screens light up with incoming threats. Here's what's supposed to happen. Satellite systems detect the launch within seconds. Computers analyze the trajectory, and warnings cascade down through military and civilian channels. You'd get a message on your phone. Sirens would wail. Emergency broadcasts would interrupt every screen. You'd have maybe 15 to 30 minutes to find shelter. That's the plan anyway. But here's the reality. Most warning systems were designed in the 1960s and haven't been meaningfully updated since. The United States has a patchwork of alert systems that include actual air raid sirens from the Cold War era, except most of them don't work anymore, and the ones that do, nobody maintains them. In 2018, Hawaii sent out a false ballistic missile alert, and it took 38 minutes to send a correction. 38 minutes. In a real attack, everyone would already be dead. The emergency alert system that's supposed to reach your phone, it's the same system used for Amber Alerts and weather warnings, and studies show most people ignore these notifications or don't understand what they mean. When that Hawaii alert went out, people didn't know if they should shelter in place, evacuate, or just accept their fate. Some hid in bathtubs. Others kept playing golf. Nobody really knew what to do, because nobody had ever actually practiced for this. And that's in America, one of the most prepared nations on Earth. In most countries, there's no warning system at all. You'd find out about nuclear war the same way you'd find out about anything else, from social media, assuming the infrastructure holds long enough for someone to post about it. The brutal truth is this. The warning systems we have are designed to alert governments and militaries, not regular people. Okay, so somehow you got the warning. The alert is real. Nuclear weapons are inbound. Now what? Every Cold War movie shows people rushing into underground bunkers, thick concrete shelters stocked with supplies. Surely those exist, right? Well, yes and no. During the Cold War, some countries built extensive shelter systems. Switzerland has enough nuclear bunkers to house its entire population. Every building constructed after 1963 is required by law to have a fallout shelter or contribute to a public one. Sweden has similar systems. But these are the exceptions, not the rule. In the United States, the massive civil defense shelter program of the 1960s has been almost completely abandoned. Those old yellow and black fallout shelter signs you sometimes see on buildings? Most of those shelters don't exist anymore. They've been converted into storage rooms, parking garages, or just forgotten entirely. The supplies that were stockpiled, water, crackers, medical kits, were removed decades ago or have long since expired. China has built extensive tunnel systems under major cities, but they're primarily for military use and party officials. Russia maintains bunkers for government continuity, not for regular citizens. The United Kingdom's network of bunkers could maybe protect a few thousand people in a country of 67 million. So where does that leave you? Your best bet is actually your basement, if you have one, or the center of a large concrete building, away from windows. Basically, you want as much mass as possible between you and the outside world. Concrete, brick, earth, anything to block radiation. But here's the problem. Most modern buildings aren't built with this in mind at all. Glass skyscrapers, open floor plans, lightweight materials, none of it helps. And if you live in a wood frame house or an apartment building, you're in trouble. Let's say you somehow made it to shelter in time. You're huddled in a basement or the interior room of a concrete building. The bombs have started falling. What happens in that first hour will determine whether civilization has any chance of surviving what comes next. First, the obvious. Anyone near the detonation sites is simply gone. The thermal radiation from a nuclear fireball vaporizes everything within a certain radius. There's no shelter from being at ground zero. But the real chaos begins in the ring around the blast zones. Millions of people will be injured simultaneously. Burns, lacerations from shattered glass, crush injuries from collapsed buildings, radiation exposure. And here's where our preparedness completely falls apart. A single nuclear weapon on a major city could create more casualties in seconds than most countries' entire hospital systems can handle in a year. Modern hospitals operate on a just-in-time model. They don't stockpile supplies or maintain excess capacity because it's expensive. On a normal day, many urban hospitals are already at or near capacity. Now, imagine 100,000 burn victims arriving at once. There aren't enough beds. There aren't enough doctors. There aren't enough burn units in entire countries to handle what a single nuclear weapon would create. The medical supplies needed, morphine, antibiotics, IV fluids, bandages, would be exhausted in hours. And that's assuming the hospitals are even still standing, and that doctors and nurses show up for work instead of trying to find their own families. But it gets worse. In that first hour, communication networks will likely fail. Cell towers will be destroyed or overwhelmed. The internet relies on infrastructure that's incredibly fragile. Data centers, fiber optic cables, power grids. When these start failing, you lose the ability to coordinate any response at all. So the bombs have fallen, the immediate chaos is unfolding, and now the power grid starts to fail. This is where our modern civilization hits a wall it never saw coming. We've built a world that runs on electricity, and we've built it assuming the electricity will always be there. Nuclear weapons create an electromagnetic pulse, or EMP, when they detonate. A high-altitude detonation can knock out electronics across hundreds or even thousands of kilometers. But even without EMP, the power grid is going down. Here's why. Our electrical infrastructure is a delicate balancing act of supply and demand happening in real time. When nuclear weapons destroy power plants, substations, and transmission lines, the whole system becomes unstable. Grid operators would try to prevent cascading failures by shutting down sections, but in a nuclear war scenario, there's nobody left to coordinate this. The grid simply collapses, and once it's down, it's not coming back up anytime soon. Modern power plants, even the ones that survive, can't just restart themselves. They need power to start producing power, a problem called a black start. Some plants have backup generators for this, but these are designed for localized outages, not the complete collapse of the grid across entire continents. Within hours, backup generators at hospitals, water treatment plants, and data centers will start running out of fuel. Fuel pumps need electricity to work, so there's no way to get more fuel to the generators. The modern world runs on supply chains that move constantly, and all of those chains have just snapped. No power means no refrigeration. Food and grocery stores and warehouses start spoiling immediately. No power means no water pumps. Most cities rely on electric pumps to maintain water pressure. Within a day, your tap runs dry. No power means no sewage treatment. Waste backs up into the system. Okay, so you've survived the blast. You're in shelter. The power is gone. And now comes the invisible killer that most people completely misunderstand: radiation. This is where all those Cold War duck and cover drills and old civil defense pamphlets actually had something useful to say, even if nobody remembers it anymore. When nuclear weapons detonate, they create two main radiation threats. First, there's the initial radiation from the blast itself, gamma rays and neutrons that kill anyone close enough within minutes. But if you're far enough away to survive the blast, you probably survived this too. The real threat is fallout. Fallout is radioactive debris, dirt, building materials, bomb residue that gets sucked up into the mushroom cloud and then rains back down over hours and days. This stuff is laced with radioactive isotopes that emit radiation as they decay. And here's the critical thing that almost nobody knows anymore. If you can stay inside and away from fallout for the first 48 hours, your survival chances increase dramatically. Radiation from fallout decreases rapidly. After 7 hours, it's down to about 10% of the initial level. After 2 days, it's down to 1%. This is the 7 to 10 rule that used to be taught in schools, but has been completely forgotten. But staying inside for 48 hours sounds easy until you realize what it actually means. You can't go outside to check on family. You can't go find food or water. You can't leave even if your house is damaged or there's a fire nearby. And you need to stay in the most protected part of your shelter. The problem is that nobody has prepared for this. How many people have 48 hours of food and water stored at home? How many even have a radio that works without internet or cell service to get information about where the fallout is worst? So you've made it through the first 2 days. The radiation levels are dropping. You need food, water, medicine. You venture outside and discover something terrifying. All the invisible systems that held civilization together have vanished, and nobody knows how to put them back. This is where we learn the hard way that modern society is built on trust, laws, and the assumption that tomorrow will basically look like today. When nuclear war shatters that assumption, things fall apart faster than anyone predicted. Money stops meaning anything almost immediately. Your bank account is just numbers in a computer somewhere, and the computers are gone, or the power is out, or the banks are destroyed. Credit cards don't work. Digital payments don't work. Even cash becomes questionable, because what can you actually buy with it? Store owners aren't opening their stores. There's no new inventory coming. Whatever's left is survival supplies, and people aren't selling. They're hoarding or defending it. Laws become unenforceable because there's no one to enforce them. Police and military personnel face an impossible choice: do their duty or save their own families. Most choose family. The ones who stay at their posts are overwhelmed immediately. How do you maintain order when millions of people need food, water, and medical care that doesn't exist? You can't arrest your way out of mass starvation. Governments, if they still exist in any meaningful way, have retreated to bunkers to ensure continuity of operations. But continuity of what exactly? They can't communicate with citizens. They can't deliver services. They can't even prove they're still in charge. Some local authorities might try to organize survival efforts, but without resources or communication, these efforts are isolated and small scale. What emerges instead are informal groups, neighborhoods banding together, communities pooling resources, or in darker scenarios, armed groups taking what they need by force. Now we're weeks into the nuclear aftermath, and the real test of survival begins. The initial chaos has settled into a grim new reality. This is the long emergency, and it's the part that almost no preparation accounts for. The bombs only killed millions. What comes next could kill billions. Here's what nobody talks about. Surviving nuclear war isn't really about surviving the explosions or even the radiation. It's about surviving the collapse of everything that keeps 7 billion people alive. We've built a world that can support an enormous population, but only with fertilizers, pesticides, machinery, fuel, global trade, and functioning infrastructure. Take those away, and the math becomes simple and cruel. Without industrial agriculture, the Earth can support maybe 1 or 2 billion people. We currently have 8 billion. The difference has to go somewhere. Starvation begins within weeks. Remember, most people have only a few days of food at home. Grocery stores are already empty. The fields that could grow food can't be planted because there's no fuel for tractors, no fertilizer, no seeds distributed by supply chains that no longer exist. Even if you could plant, who's doing the work? Farming without machinery is brutally labor-intensive, and most people have no idea how to do it. Water becomes the immediate crisis in cities. Without electricity, there's no pumping, no treatment, no distribution. People turn to rivers and lakes, but without water treatment, waterborne diseases spread rapidly. Cholera, typhoid, dysentery, diseases we'd almost forgotten about come roaring back. Medicine runs out fast. Diabetics without insulin, people with heart conditions without their medications. Infections that would be trivial to treat with antibiotics become death sentences. Hospitals that survived are overrun and out of supplies. The injured from the initial attacks, who might have survived with proper care, die slowly from infected wounds. And winter is coming, or summer. Depending on when the war happened, exposure kills millions more. So here we are at the end of our thought experiment, and we need to answer the question we started with. If nuclear war happened tomorrow, are we ready? The answer is no. We're not even close. And the most disturbing part is that we used to be more ready than we are now. During the Cold War, there was civil defense infrastructure. There were public shelters, stockpiled supplies, education programs that taught people what to do. It wasn't perfect, and it probably wouldn't have saved most people. But it was something. We've let almost all of it decay. We've convinced ourselves that nuclear war is so unlikely, so unthinkable, that we don't need to prepare for it. But the weapons haven't gone away. The tensions haven't gone away. If anything, the risk is growing as more countries acquire nuclear weapons and old treaties break down. We've built a civilization that's incredibly powerful, but also incredibly fragile. We depend on systems that have no backup plans. Our food comes from far away. Our water comes from electric pumps. Our medicine comes from complex supply chains. Our communication relies on satellites and fiber optic cables. Take out a few key pieces and the whole thing collapses like a house of cards. The darkest truth is this. Even if we started preparing tomorrow, rebuilding shelters, stockpiling supplies, training people, hardening infrastructure, we still couldn't save most people in a full-scale nuclear war. The weapons are simply too destructive and our societies too complex and interdependent to survive their use. But that doesn't mean preparation is pointless. It means we need to do everything possible to make sure nuclear war never happens at all. Treaties that reduce arsenals, systems that prevent accidental launches, diplomatic channels that stay open even when tensions are high, and citizens who understand the stakes and demand their governments take this seriously. Because here's the thing, nuclear war is preventable. It's not a natural disaster or an asteroid strike. It's a choice, a series of choices made by humans, which means we can choose differently. We can choose to step back from the brink, to disarm, to build a world where these weapons are relegated to history rather than pointed at each other's cities. The survivors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki spent their lives telling the world what nuclear weapons actually do. They begged us to remember, to never use them again. But memories fade. The last of those survivors are dying. Soon, there will be no one left who actually experienced what we're talking about. And that's dangerous because it lets us think of nuclear war as abstract, as numbers and scenarios, rather than burning children and cities full of shadows where people used to be. So no, we're not ready for nuclear war tomorrow. We never will be ready. We can't be ready. The only real preparation is to make absolutely certain it never happens. Everything else, the bunkers, the plans, the supplies, is just a comforting fiction we tell ourselves to avoid facing the real truth. If the missiles fly, almost everything and everyone we know is gone. And no amount of preparation changes that. The good news, the only good news, is that we still have time. The bombs haven't fallen yet. Tomorrow is still just tomorrow. We can still choose a different path. The question is, will we? Because the clock is ticking, and it has been for decades. We've been lucky so far, but luck runs out. And when it comes to nuclear weapons, you only need to be unlucky once.